Get out. You're fired. I never want to see your face in here again." The words, spoken by the general manager, Trevor, sliced through the kitchen's chaotic symphony of clattering pans and hissing grills. The air grew thick, suffocating. Every member of the kitchen's staff froze, their movements suspended in a tableau of disbelief. Damon, the quiet black man who had been their dishwasher for the past week, slowly reached for the strings of his soiled apron. His movements were deliberate, almost graceful, a stark contrast to the venom in Trevor's voice. Tears welled in the eyes of a young line cook. The head chef, Isabella, stared at the floor, her jaw clenched tight. No one dared to speak. Trevor stepped closer, his shadow falling over Damon. His sense of entitlement was a palpable force, dripping from him like poison. "I said take that filthy thing off and get out. Now." Damon's fingers worked the knot with unhurried precision. He untied the apron that smelled of grease and bleach, folding it with the meticulous care of a man who had folded far more important things. Like blueprints for empires, the folded apron was placed gently on the steel counter, a final, silent statement. Without a word, he turned his back on the man who had just fired him, on the kitchen he had secretly come to save. His footsteps echoed on the tiled floor, each one a beat in a countdown to a reckoning no one saw coming. As the kitchen door swung shut with a soft click, a dishwasher from the evening shift whispered into the crushing silence, his voice low and full of awe. "They have no idea. They have no idea who they just threw out of this kitchen." That silence would become a ghost, haunting the memory of every person who stood by and did nothing. For what happens when you humiliate the wrong man? What happens when the dishwasher you just fired owns the very ground you stand on? From his corner office on the 32nd floor of a gleaming Atlanta skyscraper, Damon Mitchell, 42, stared at a spreadsheet, the numbers twisted in his gut like a dull knife. His name was etched in gold on the glass door. His face, the picture of black excellence and entrepreneurial success, graced the covers of business magazines scattered across his mahogany desk. He had built a restaurant empire from a single dream, but right now, success tasted like ash. The report before him was an obituary for that dream. Golden Leaf, his first restaurant, his heart and soul poured into brick and mortar, was dying. Revenue was in a free fall. Staff turnover was an epidemic. Customer reviews had plummeted from a proud 5 stars to a dismal one. His baby was bleeding out, and he was watching from an ivory tower. 15 years ago, Damon had stood in that same building, then an empty, derelict space on Peachtree Street. He saw past the peeling paint and broken tiles. He saw a sanctuary. Golden Leaf wasn't just going to be a restaurant. It would be a testament. A place where food told the stories of his heritage, where a young black chef's vision could thrive, bold and unapologetic. Now, clad in a $1,000 suit, he felt a universe away from that kitchen. He had become a creature of boardrooms and profit margins, a man who spoke the language of spreadsheets instead of the poetry of perfectly balanced spices. The sizzle of onions in hot oil had been replaced by the stereo buzz of his smartphone, each notification another nail in Golden Leaf's coffin. He had hired Trevor Carson as general manager 6 months ago. The board had pushed for it. Fresh perspective, they'd said. An MBA from a top school. Trevor was young, ambitious, and polished, with references as bright as his perfectly straight teeth. But something in his eyes had given Damon pause, a flicker of cold calculation that he had foolishly ignored. Now that flicker had become a raging fire, burning his legacy to the ground. Inventory was off. Staff complaints were being mysteriously silenced before they reached him. The kitchen, once alive with passion, had lost its rhythm, its soul. Damon walked to the floor, to its ceiling window, the city sprawling beneath him. He was a king in a castle, watching his first and most beloved territory fall to ruin. His reflection stared back, a man in an expensive cage, his eyes wary with a success that felt hollow. The decision crystallized sharp and clear. He couldn't fix this from 32 floors up. To find the sickness, he had to be on the ground among the roots. He strode to the back of his walk-in closet, past the neat rows of tailored suits. Tucked away, wrinkled and forgotten, was a faded t-shirt and a pair of worn jeans, relics from a time when his hands were calloused and his dreams were his only currency. As he changed, the weight of the CEO persona lifted, replaced by a familiar, hungry-feeling purpose. He pulled a baseball cap low over his eyes and looked in the mirror. He was no longer Damon Mitchell, restaurant mogul. He was just a man looking for a job. "They won't see me coming," he whispered to his reflection. The hostess at Golden Leaf barely glanced up from her phone. "Kitchen's hiring," she mumbled, waving a dismissive hand toward the back. Talk to Trevor. Walking through the dining room he had designed, past tables he had chosen, Damon felt like a ghost haunting his own life. The kitchen doors swung open, and the wrongness of the place hit him like a physical blow. The air smelled of chemical cleaners and stale grease, not the rich, inviting aromas of garlic and herbs. The sounds were muted, fearful. The clatter of utensils stifled, the voices hushed. The joy was gone. "You looking for work?" The voice was sharp, impatient. Damon turned. Trevor Carson was tall and blonde, with the kind of aggressive handsomeness that thrived in corporate environments. His eyes swept over Damon's worn clothes, cataloging, judging, and dismissing him in a single, cold glance. "Yes, sir," Damon said, keeping his voice humble, his posture stooped. "Need a job." "Name?" "Danny," Damon replied, choosing a name close enough to remember, different enough to hide behind. "Experience. Dishwasher, prep cook. Anything you need." Trevor wasn't listening. He was already turning away. "We're short-staffed. You can wash dishes. Minimum wage, cash at the end of the week. Don't steal, don't slack, and don't cause problems." The casual assumption that he, a black man in worn clothes, would be a thief made Damon's jaw tighten, but he simply nodded. "Understood. Start now." Trevor walked away without a second glance, already lost in his phone. Carlos, a tired-looking man in his 50s with kind eyes and defeated shoulders, showed Damon to the dish pit. It was a hell of steam and steel, a mountain of dirty plates forming a wall between him and the rest of the kitchen. It was brutal work, but it was also the perfect observation post. Over the next few days, Damon watched, and what he saw broke his heart. He saw Chef Isabella Reyes, a culinary firecracker he'd hired years ago, move like a ghost, her passion extinguished. He saw James, a talented 20-year-old cook, tremble every time Trevor walked past his station, his confidence systematically dismantled. And he saw Trevor moving like a predator through his kingdom, ruling with sharp words, cutting looks, and a constant undercurrent of fear. During a break, Damon found James behind the restaurant, his head in his hands. "I can't do anything right," James whispered, his voice cracking. "He says I'm too stupid. My mom, she's sick. I need this job for the insurance." Damon sat beside the young man, the weight of his own complicity pressing down on him. He had put this predator in charge. He had let this happen. He slipped a few $100s into an envelope from his wallet. "For your mom." James stared at the money, then at Damon. "I can't." "Why?" "Because people need to look out for each other," Damon said softly. "That's all." It wasn't just mismanagement, it was theft. Damon started noticing it in the inventory. Premium olive oil replaced with cheap vegetable blends. Prime cuts of beef on the order sheets, but only standard grade chuck in the cooler. Late one night, he saw at firsthand Trevor meeting a supplier in the back alley. Boxes were exchanged for cash. The next day, the inventory sheet showed a delivery of premium goods that never arrived. Trevor was bleeding the restaurant dry, selling off its quality for his own profit while charging customers full price. He was poisoning Golden Leaf from the inside out. The final straw came during the Saturday night rush. The kitchen was a pressure cooker of stress and backed up orders. James, flustered at the grill, sent out a steak that was returned for being slightly overcooked. Trevor materialized beside him, his face a mask of fury. "What the hell is this?" he snarled, holding up the plate for the whole kitchen to see. "This is what happens when you hire people who don't belong in a real kitchen." The racist undertone was a punch to the gut. James, who was Mexican-American, visibly flinched. "Maybe you should go back to flipping burgers where you belong." Trevor continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "Leave the real cooking to the professionals." That was it. Damon's carefully maintained control snapped. He turned off the water to his station, the sudden silence drawing every eye in the room. He walked calmly across the floor until he stood before Trevor. "Excuse me," he said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable weight. Trevor glared at him. "What?" "The steak was cooked perfectly when it left the pass," Damon said, his gaze steady. "I watched him. If it was overcooked, it happened after it left this kitchen." The silence was absolute. Trevor's face cycled through shades of crimson. "Are you a dishwasher?" questioning me. "I'm telling you what I saw," Damon said, his voice unyielding. "And I'm telling you to stop bullying a good cook who is doing his job." Trevor's composure finally shattered. "You think you know better than me. You think some." He caught himself, the slur dying on his lips, but everyone heard the word he'd choke back. "Say it," Damon challenged softly. "Go ahead." Blinded by rage and humiliation at being called out by someone he considered less than human, Trevor lunged, shoving Damon hard against a steel counter. Pans crashed to the floor. Damon straightened up slowly, his eyes never leaving Trevor's. A cold, dangerous calm had settled over him. "You just showed everyone exactly who you are." "Get out!" Trevor screamed, his voice raw and desperate. "You're fired! Go!" Damon nodded once. He untied his apron, folded it with purpose, and placed it on the counter. He looked at James, at Isabella, at Carlos, his eyes promising a change they couldn't yet imagine. "This isn't over," he said to Trevor. Then he walked out, leaving a storm in his wake. Monday morning, Damon Mitchell walked through the front door of Golden Leaf. He wore a bespoke suit that cost more than Trevor's car. His presence radiated an authority that was so absolute, it seemed to alter the gravity in the room. The hostess stammered, "Sir, we're not open yet." "That's all right," Damon said, his voice echoing in the empty dining room. "I own the place." Trevor came storming out of his office. "What's all the noise?" He stopped dead, his brain refusing to connect the man before him with the dishwasher he had assaulted and fired. "Danny," he whispered, the name sounding absurd on his lips. "No," Damon said, the two letters landing with the force of a judge's gavel. "Damon Mitchell, owner, and as of this moment, your former boss." Trevor's face went white. The staff began to emerge from the kitchen, drawn by the confrontation. Isabella, James, Carlos, they stood in a semicircle, watching as the world shifted on its axis. "Impossible," Trevor stammered. You were a dishwasher, I was," Damon corrected, dropping a thick folder onto a table. The papers fanned out, an arsenal of evidence. "I was a dishwasher for exactly as long as it took me to see what you've done to my restaurant. To my people." He tapped the papers. "Every forged invoice, every ingredient you sold out the back door, every dollar you stole while serving garbage to my customers. It's all here." Isabella picked up an invoice, her eyes wide with fury. "Wine never received this shipment of scallops." James pointed at another sheet. "You were cutting our portions while raising menu prices." As Trevor began to crumble, two uniformed police officers walked through the door, followed by a detective. "Detective Rodriguez," Damon said, handing her the folder. "Evidence of felony embezzlement." The click of handcuffs was the final, definitive sound of Trevor's downfall. As he was led away, a ghost in an expensive shirt, Damon turned to his staff. "I owe you all an apology," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I got so caught up building an empire, I forgot to protect its heart. I let you down. Isabella stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. You came back for us? She whispered. I never should have left, Damon replied. A month later, Golden Leaf was reborn. Laughter once again echoed from the kitchen. The scent of real food, cooked with passion, filled the dining room. Damon was there, not in his office, but on the line, an apron tied around his waist, sleeves rolled up. James, now confident and thriving, called out orders with a clear voice. Carlos, promoted to assistant manager, walked the floor with a newfound dignity. And Isabella was back, a true chef in her element, the fire in her eyes burning brighter than ever. The restaurant was more than just saved, it was redeemed. Damon Mitchell, the CEO who had become a dishwasher, had learned the most profound lesson of his life. True power wasn't found in a boardroom on the 32nd floor. It was found in the heart of a kitchen, standing with your people, fighting for the soul of something you built together. He had lost his way in the pursuit of success, but by washing dishes, he had cleaned his own slate and found his way home.